Salve omnes, I am Magistra Abelseth, Ms. Abelseth, and in this video I'm going to be talking about verb qualities in Latin. First of all, which words are verbs? A verb, the word itself, comes from the Latin word verba, meaning any word. But a verb, when we're talking about it in English, is an action that changes or moves a noun. That's called a transitive verb. Portare, to carry. Coquere, to cook. A verb can also be an action that happens without changing or moving anything. This is called an intransitive verb. Ambulare, to walk. Vocare, to call. Appellare, to name. Legere, to read. Actions that link two or more parts of a sentence can also be verbs. These are called linking verbs. Most common linking verb is esse, to be. Verbs have specific qualities. Person, who does the action. Number, how many persons are doing the action. Tense, when the action happens. Voice, how the action impacts the sentence. Mood, what kind of information is being presented. And participle, which is sometimes described as a type of mood. It's not necessarily a quality of a verb exactly, but I wanted to bring up participles because we're going to be talking about them again soon. These are actions that describe nouns. Let's talk about person, number, and tense. In English, we use pronouns to show person and number. First person, I or we. Second person, you or y'all. Third person, she, he, they singular, or they plural. To organize these a different way, the singular pronouns, one person doing the action. I, you, they singular. Plural, when there's more than one person doing the action. We, y'all, and they plural. In Latin, we use verb endings. For first person, we would use O or M in the singular and MUS in the plural. For second person, we would use S in the singular and TIS in the plural. For third person, we would use T in the singular and NT in the plural. To organize these another way, the singular endings all together, when there's one person doing the action, O or M, S, and T. The plural endings, when there's more than one person doing the action, MUS, TIS, and NT. Now, let's talk about tense. This is when the action takes place. In English, we have basically three tenses. Let's start with the past tense. Our past tense can be ongoing, I was verbing. Our past tense can be complete or simple, I verbed, I have verbed. Or our past tense can be emphatic, I did verb, I had verbed. We also have the present tense. Ongoing, I am verbing. Complete or simple, I verb. Emphatic, I am verbing. In the future tense, we have ongoing, I will be verbing. Complete or simple, I will verb. Emphatic, I will verb. In Latin, this is a little bit different. There are 6 tenses, and there's more than one version of the past. So the imperfect tense in Latin represents ongoing action in the past. I was verbing. The perfect tense in Latin represents complete or simple action in the past. I verbed, I have verbed. The pluperfect tense in Latin represents action that has happened a really long time ago. I had verbed, but it's not the same as emphasis exactly. If you wanted to show emphasis, you might use the word jam, meaning already. There's only one present tense in Latin. It shows ongoing action in the present, I am verbing, And it shows simple action in the present, I verb. Latin has one verb form for both, so you kind of have to use context when you're deciding how to translate it into English. For emphasis, if we want to emphasize the time when it's happening, we might use the word nunc. I'm doing it now. There are two versions of the future tense in Latin. The future, which shows ongoing future action, I will be verbing, and simple future action, I will verb. So again, you would have to use context when you're translating from Latin into English. And then the future perfect, which is action that will be finished in the future. I will have verbed. We don't tend to use that one very often in English, but it makes more sense in Latin as its own verb form. For emphasis, you might use the word quondam, meaning at a certain time, or another word that emphasizes the date or the deadline of the action. Now let's talk about voice, mood, and participle. Voice. We have active voice, where the nominative subject is responsible for the action, and the action happens to an accusative direct object. For example, the boy climbs the tree. The boy is the nominative subject, climbs is the active voice verb, the tree is the accusative direct object. Then there's passive voice. In passive voice, an action happens to a nominative subject, and an ablative agent is responsible for the action. For example, the tree is being climbed by the boy. The tree is the nominative subject, being climbed is the passive voice verb, and by the boy is the ablative agent. If you were to draw a picture of both of these sentences, the boy climbs the tree and the tree is being climbed by the boy, the picture would be exactly the same. The difference is in how we're discussing it in the English language with the verb, whether the verb is active voice, subject, responsible, or whether the verb is passive voice, ablative agent, responsible. The subject of the verb is not the same as the topic of the sentence, and it's not what the sentence is about. In active voice verbs, the subject is the word or phrase that comes before the verb and is responsible for making the action happen in English. With passive voice verbs, the subject is the word or phrase that comes before the verb and is what the action happens to, also in English. This one can be a little bit tricky, especially with the first time that you encounter the passive voice in Latin. If you've grown up in public school in the United States of America, your English teachers have taught you that the passive voice is not something that you should ever be using. So it can be a little bit difficult to figure out how to make it work when you were taught not to do it in English. It happens a lot in Latin though, so we'll be seeing plenty of it and you'll get lots of practice working with it, I promise. Now let's talk about voice in Latin. In the active voice, the nominative subject is responsible for the action. The action happens to an accusative direct object. For example, puer arborem ascendit. Puer is the nominative subject, ascendit is the active voice verb, and arborem is the accusative direct object. This is the same sentence we had on the previous slide, just in Latin. The boy climbs the tree. In passive voice, the action happens to a nominative subject, and an ablative agent is responsible for the action. For example, arbor a puero ascenditur. Arbor is the nominative subject, ascenditur is the passive voice verb, and a puero is the ablative agent. This is again the same sentence that we had on the previous slide. The tree is being climbed by the boy. This note also still applies. The subject of the verb is not necessarily the topic of the sentence or what the sentence is about. With active voice verbs, the subject is the word or phrase that comes before the verb and is responsible for making the action happen. With passive voice verbs, the subject is the word or phrase that comes before the verb and is what the action happens to. Now let's talk about mood. The indicative mood states a fact or observation. It expects to be informative. It indicates that something is happening. The imperative mood states a command, expects someone else to do something. The infinitive mood states a secondary action in a sentence. It expects to elaborate on what happens. The subjunctive mood states intangible actions such as wishes, orders, characteristics, intentions, or results. These are things that could happen but are not observed and may not be factual. We don't see the subjunctive very often in English, but when we do see it, we'll use words like may have, might, or might have. Now let's talk about mood in Latin. The indicative mood covers those 6 tenses that we've already looked at: present, imperfect, future, perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect. I'll go into detail about these in a different video. Just like in English, it states a fact or an observation and expects to be informative. The imperative, in Latin, we form it off of the infinitive, that RE form. We take off the RE and we have, for example, sede, sit down you, or sedete, sit down all of you, in the plural. When I greet you in class and I say salvete, I'm telling all of you, be well. This states a command and expects someone else to do something. The infinitive is the RE form, for example, sedere, to sit. It states a secondary action in a sentence and expects to elaborate on what happens. And the subjunctive in Latin gets really complicated, so we're going to spend our time in a different video going into that in detail. But the concept is the same. It's an intangible action, it's a wish, it's an order, it's a characteristic, it's an intention and a result. It might even be a question. It's about things that could happen, but may not have actually happened. And it's about things that might not quite be factual. It's mostly extinct in English, and in English we'll see it with may have, might, or might have. And as I said before, in Latin the forms are a bit more complicated, so we'll talk about that in more detail in a different video. Now let's talk about participles. These are present or ongoing actions that describe nouns. For example, while climbing the tree, Marcus looks for squirrels. While she is walking in the field, Cornelia was thinking about Flavia. Past completed actions that describe nouns. For example, after he climbed the tree, Marcus could see a great distance. After she had walked in the field, Cornelia was sitting near the river. Future actions that describe nouns. For example, about to go home, Marcus climbs down the tree. About to write a letter, Cornelia went home.